This is the story of how 17 obscure metallic elements became the most dangerous choke point in the global economy, and why the device in your pocket connects you to a national security crisis that has been building for 40 years. The phone you are holding right now contains roughly 8 rare earth elements, and the United States imports about 80% of the rare earth compounds and metals it consumes, with 71% of those imports tracing back to a single country, China. Over the next 20 minutes, we will walk through exactly what rare earths are, how they ended up controlled by one government, what happened when that government started using them as a weapon, and what the United States is doing right now in 2025 and 2026 to claw its way back out. Rare earth elements are a group of 17 metals defined by the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry, 15 of which are the lanthanides on the periodic table, with scandium and yttrium added to round out the family. Their names sound like a wizard's spellbook, with neodymium, dysprosium, terbium, europium, samarium, yttrium, and lanthanum among the most commercially important. Here is the first surprise. They are not actually rare in any geological sense. Cerium, one of the lanthanides, ranks as the 25th most abundant element in the Earth's crust, which makes it more common than copper. The label rare reflects something different, because these elements are rarely found in concentrations high enough to mine economically, and they always occur intermixed with each other, which means separating them demands extremely complex chemistry. So why do we need them at all? Rare earths deliver 3 properties that almost no other material can replicate, which are powerful magnetism, vivid luminescence, and unique catalytic behavior. The strongest commercial magnets ever produced are neodymium iron-boron magnets, roughly 10 times stronger than the ferrite magnets your grandparents kept on the fridge, and when you alloy them with dysprosium or terbium, they keep working at high temperatures, which is exactly why they end up inside electric vehicle motors and weapons systems. Now let's crack open your phone. Inside a typical modern smartphone, 8 rare earth elements quietly do their work together. Europium phosphors produce the red pixels on your display, terbium produces the green pixels, and yttrium serves as the host matrix that converts the blue LED backlight into the white light that lets your screen exist at all. The speaker that plays your music, the microphone that picks up your voice, and the haptic engine that gives you that satisfying tap when you type all rely on miniature neodymium iron-boron magnets, often alloyed with dysprosium for heat resistance. According to the American Geosciences Institute, lanthanum can account for as much as half of the optical glass in a phone camera lens, while erbium and ytterbium handle optical and electronic functions deeper in the circuitry. Strip the rare earths out of your phone, and what you have left is plastic and silicon. Your phone, though, sits at the small end of the story. These same elements live inside wind turbines, MRI machines, hard drives, hybrid and electric vehicles, fiber optic networks, LED lighting, and petroleum refining operations. And, critically for this video, they live inside modern weapons. The Department of Defense has been quietly worried about rare earths for years. And the reason is simple, because nearly every advanced weapon system in the American arsenal depends on them. According to figures from the Congressional Research Service and Department of Defense estimates that have been widely circulated, the F-35 Lightning II fighter jet contains roughly 920 pounds of rare earth materials per aircraft. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer contains about 5,200 pounds, and a Virginia-class submarine packs roughly 9,200 pounds into its hull. This dependence on rare earths is striking. Something important needs flagging here. Adamas Intelligence published an audit in 2025, arguing that the 920-pound figure for the F-35 traces back to a single Department of Defense recycling study from 2012 that was never publicly released, and that the actual onboard magnet mass likely comes closer to 50 pounds of samarium cobalt alloy per aircraft. The Government Accountability Office, in a September 2024 report, calculated that total Department of Defense rare earth demand amounts to less than 0.1% of global consumption. The issue is not quantity, in other words, but rather the specific high-performance grades that nobody outside China can produce at scale. Samarium cobalt magnets, developed by the U.S. Air Force back in the 1960s, remain the only commercial magnets that retain their performance above 200 degrees Celsius. They sit inside the F-35's flight control actuators, inside its integrated power package, inside the transmit-receive modules of its radar, and inside its electronic warfare systems. Lockheed Martin ranks as the largest single U.S. consumer of samarium, using around 22.6 kilograms per F-35. The role of samarium cobalt in these systems is critical. Inside submarines, rare earth permanent magnets drive the propulsion motors and the sonar transducers. Missile guidance systems rely on neodymium magnets to move the fins through their actuators. Laser designators built around yttrium aluminum garnet crystals depend on yttrium and neodymium. Jet engine turbine blades carry thermal barrier coatings of yttria-stabilized zirconia, and the optical glass in night vision systems comes doped with lanthanum and gadolinium. And then there is the 2022 incident, when F-35 deliveries paused temporarily after it was discovered that a Honeywell-supplied component contained a samarium cobalt alloy of Chinese origin, in violation of federal procurement law. That is how deep the dependency actually runs. To understand the current crisis, you have to understand how we arrived here, because for most of the 20th century, the United States dominated this industry. Molybdenum Corporation of America began producing rare earths at Mountain Pass in the Mojave Desert of California, all the way back in 1952. By the 1960s, the operation had expanded to meet demand for europium, which produced the red phosphor in color televisions, and from the mid-1960s into the 1990s, Mountain Pass reigned as the dominant rare earth source on Earth, supplying roughly 70% of global demand for much of that period. A few things then happened at once. In January of 1992, during what came to be known as his Southern Tour, Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping delivered a remark that became the unofficial motto of China's resource strategy, when he said, "The Middle East has its oil, China has rare earth." China's rare earth deposits account for 80% of identified global reserves. You can compare the status of these reserves to that of oil in the Middle East. It is of extremely important strategic significance. We must be sure to handle the rare earth issue properly and make the fullest use of our country's advantage in rare earth resources. This quote, by the way, gets misdated to 1987 constantly. The scholar Julie Klinger, who wrote the book Rare Earth Frontiers for Cornell University Press in 2017, traced the actual date to January of 1992, and Chinese state media confirms the same timeline. While Deng was articulating the strategy in Beijing, the United States was quietly retreating in California. Mountain Pass developed a serious environmental problem, because between 1984 and 1998, roughly 60 pipeline ruptures spilled around 600,000 gallons of radioactive wastewater onto the Mojave Desert floor. Authorities shut down the wastewater pipeline in 1998, and the mine itself closed completely in 2002, partly because of those environmental issues, and partly because Chinese producers were undercutting global prices. By 1988, China had already overtaken the United States in rare earth output, and by 2010, Chinese mines were producing roughly 97% of the world's rare earths. The bottom had fallen out of the Western industry. There's another piece of this story worth knowing. General Motors and Sumitomo Special Metals of Japan co-developed the neodymium iron boron magnet back in 1982, and General Motors created a specialized subsidiary called Magnequench to produce them. The result was that in the late 1990s, Magnequench was acquired by a Chinese state-owned consortium. The technology migrated east, and Japanese processing know-how moved across the Pacific during the same era. The United States and Japan effectively handed China the entire downstream industry. For a long stretch, almost nobody outside the industry paid attention, and that changed in September of 2010. On September 7, 2010, a Chinese fishing trawler collided with two Japanese Coast Guard vessels near the Senkaku Islands, which China calls the Diaoyu Islands, and Japanese authorities arrested the Chinese captain. Within weeks, Chinese customs stopped processing rare earth shipments to Japan, which meant that for roughly 2 months, the world's second-largest economy was effectively cut off from a material it needed to manufacture cars, electronics, and industrial machinery. Banri Kaiyeda, Japan's Minister of Economic and Fiscal Policy, told the press at the time, "Right now, the de facto export prohibition that China has adopted is causing profoundly great impact on Japan's economy." Beijing also slashed its overall rare earth export quotas for the second half of 2010 by 72%, and prices exploded. According to Adamas Intelligence, dysprosium oxide rose from about $91 per kilogram in January of 2009 to a peak of $2,377 per kilogram in August of 2011. Which works out to a 26-fold increase, and other rare earths spiked similarly. That 2010 episode caused panic in capitals from Washington to Brussels to Tokyo. Molycorp, the company that owned Mountain Pass, ran a successful IPO that same year and reopened the California mine, while the United States, the European Union, and Japan filed a complaint at the World Trade Organization, which ruled against China's export quotas in 2014. China dropped the quotas in January of 2015 and removed the export tariffs that May. Then, almost immediately, the panic died down, prices crashed, and in June of 2015, Molycorp filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The Mountain Pass assets ended up sold out of bankruptcy at auction in 2017 for $20.5 million to a consortium that included JHL Capital, QVT Financial, and Shenghai Resources, which was a Chinese state-linked rare earth company that took a minority, non-voting stake of around 8%. That consortium became MP Materials. Mountain Pass restarted operations in January of 2018, and for years, much of what came out of the California ground was shipped back to China for processing. The supply chain was not really American. In other words, it was just American on the front end. The next signal arrived on May 20th, 2019, in the middle of the Trump administration's first trade war with China, when Xi Jinping made a public visit to JL Mag Rare Earth Company in Guangzhou, in Jiangxi Province. The visit was read, correctly, as a message. A few days later, on May 29, 2019, the People's Daily, the official newspaper of the Chinese Communist Party, published an editorial that ended with the phrase, "Don't say we didn't warn you." The exact Chinese phrasing matched wording Beijing had used just before its 1962 border war with India and its 1979 war with Vietnam. Around the same time, China's National Development and Reform Commission asked in an official statement whether rare earths would become China's counterweapon against the USA's unwarranted suppression. The message landed clearly, but Beijing did not pull the trigger in 2019. The trigger came later, in stages. December of 2023 brought a Chinese ban on the export of rare earth processing technology and magnet-making technology. June of 2024 saw Premier Li Cheng sign an order classifying rare earths as Chinese state property, effective October 1, 2024. By December of 2024, China had imposed new restrictions on rare earth and other critical mineral exports to the United States in response to United States semiconductor export controls. Then came 2025. On March 20, 2025, President Trump signed Executive Order 14,241, titled Immediate Measures to Increase American Mineral Production, which invoked the Defense Production Act and redirected the Development Finance Corporation and the Export-Import Bank to fund domestic mineral projects. 2 weeks later, on April 4, 2025, China's Ministry of Commerce issued Announcement Number 18, which imposed export license requirements on 7 medium and heavy rare earths, namely samarium, gadolinium, terbium, dysprosium, lutetium, scandium, and yttrium, along with their oxides, alloys, and magnet materials. Beijing framed this as a response to Trump's reciprocal tariffs, and the result was the institutionalization of China's ability to throttle supply at will. China escalated dramatically on October 9, 2025, when the Ministry of Commerce issued Announcement Number 61, which added 5 more rare earths to the controlled list, namely holmium, erbium, thulium, europium, and ytterbium. 12 of the 17 rare earth elements were now subject to Chinese export licenses. The truly aggressive part was the extraterritorial rule. Beijing announced that any foreign product containing as little as 0.1% Chinese origin, rare earth by value, would require a Chinese export license to ship anywhere in the world, and any item made using Chinese rare earth processing technology would face similar controls. New equipment export controls were scheduled to take effect December 1, 2025. Gracelyn Bascarin, who runs the Critical Minerals Security Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, put it this way in October of 2025. She said, "We've never had mineral restrictions at this level, and particularly ones targeted at our defense industry. China's weaponization of rare earths has backed us into a very tight corner when it comes to our own national security." On October 30, 2025, at the Trump-Xi meeting in Busan, South Korea, China agreed to suspend the October 9th controls for 1 year until November 10, 2026. In exchange, the United States reduced tariffs from 57% to 47% and suspended its own ownership-related rules for a year, with the suspension officially published on November 7, 2025. Here's the part that matters, though. The April 2025 controls remain fully in force, and the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China reported that fewer than 25% of around 140 license applications had been approved after those April controls took effect. China's leverage isn't theoretical, it's operational right now. The response from Washington has been, by historical standards, dramatic. July 10, 2025 brought what is probably the most significant industrial policy intervention in the rare earth sector in American history, when the Department of Defense announced it was taking a 15% equity stake in MP Materials, the company that owns Mountain Pass. The Pentagon executed this through a $400 million purchase of convertible preferred stock and warrants at $30.03 per share, and it also provided a $150 million loan through the Office of Strategic Capital. The most important part of the deal is the price floor. The Department of Defense agreed to a 10-year, $110 per kilogram price floor on neodymium praseodymium oxide, which works out to roughly double the prevailing Chinese market price. The Pentagon also committed to buying 100% of the magnets produced at MP Materials' planned new 10X facility, which is expected to come online in 2028 with a capacity of 10,000 tons per year. With that one transaction, the Department of Defense became the largest single shareholder in MP Materials. James Litinsky, the founder and chief executive officer of MP Materials, called it this way: "This initiative marks a decisive action by the Trump administration to accelerate American supply chain independence." On CNBC, he added, "I want to be very clear. This is not a nationalization. We remain a thriving public company. We now have a great new partner in our economically largest shareholder, DoD, but we still control our company. We control our destiny. We are shareholder-driven." 5 days later, on July 15, 2025, Apple announced a $500 million partnership with MP Materials to produce 100% recycled neodymium iron boron magnets at MP's Fort Worth, Texas facility called Independence. Apple committed to a $200 million prepayment, with magnet shipments beginning in 2027. Tim Cook said that rare earth materials are essential for making advanced technology and that the partnership will help strengthen the supply of these vital materials here in the United States. MP Materials stock, which had been trading around $30 before the Department of Defense deal, surged to an all-time high of $82.50 in August 2025, and the company's market capitalization reached roughly $13.3 billion. The response goes well beyond MP Materials. Energy Fuels, which operates the White Mesa Mill in Utah, began producing neodymium praseodymium oxide from monazite in 2024 and is now piloting dysprosium production. USA Rare Earth is constructing a sintered magnet facility in Stillwater, Oklahoma, targeting commercial production in the first half of 2026. Lynas Rare Earths, the Australian company that currently ranks as the only major non-Chinese integrated producer, produced the first commercial dysprosium oxide outside China on May 16, 2025, at its facility in Malaysia. Amanda Lacaze, the chief executive officer of Lynas, said Lynas confirmed first dysprosium production on the new production line at Lynas, Malaysia. She said the production of this on-specification dysprosium is a significant step for supply chain resilience and provides customers with the option of sourcing product from a supplier outside China. The Department of Defense has issued major grants to support this build-out. Lynas received $258 million for a heavy rare earth refinery in Seadrift, Texas. Energy Fuels received $35 million. Rare earth salts in Nebraska received $30 million. Earlier rounds had provided more than $120 million in Defense Production Act funding to MP materials. The legislation backing all this carries serious weight. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, signed on July 4, 2025, provides $5 billion to the Industrial Base Fund, $500 million to the Department of Defense's Office of Strategic Capital, and $1 billion in Defense Production Act financing through September 30, 2027. There is also a January 1, 2027 deadline under existing federal law banning rare earths originating in China from major U.S. defense systems. Before we wrap up, the other side of this debate deserves a fair hearing because there is genuine intellectual disagreement among the experts. Eugene Goltz, a professor at the University of Notre Dame who wrote a major report for the Council on Foreign Relations in 2014, has argued for over a decade that the rare earth threat is overblown. His core argument runs like this. The 2010 episode demonstrated how quickly markets adjust because Chinese export quotas were widely evaded by smuggling. Users substituted other materials, companies stockpiled supplies, and industry innovated around the constraints. Alternative suppliers like Molycorp and Lynas came online, and demand fell because companies engineered rare earths out of their products. A clear example illustrates the point. Nissan announced a new electric motor for the Leaf in November 2012 that reduced dysprosium use by 40% compared to conventional electric vehicle motors, using a grain boundary diffusion process developed with its suppliers. General Electric trimmed rare earth use in its LED products, and Siemens engineered alternatives for some wind turbine designs. MIT Technology Review, writing in 2015, observed that the 2011 price spike never produced widespread shortages, and that prices crashed as supply expanded and demand contracted. Some statistical analyses have also cast doubt on whether the 2010 Japan episode was a coordinated central government embargo or simply an opportunistic customs slowdown that built on already announced quota cuts. Skeptics also point to cost. According to figures from Benchmark Mineral Intelligence reported by Reuters in July 2025, top Chinese mines can produce total rare earth oxide for as little as $11 per kilogram, while Project Blue estimates that non-Chinese supply requires between $75 and $105 per kilogram of neodymium praseodymium to be viable. That gap is exactly why Molycorp went bankrupt in 2015. And it is exactly why the Defense Department had to set a $110 per kilogram price floor for MP materials. Building this supply chain without sustained government support is, on current cost structures, impossible. The counter-argument runs straight back. The 2010 episode was a warning. The April 2025 controls are operational policy, and the October 2025 escalation, even though it was paused, demonstrated that Beijing will use these tools at full force. The structural cost gap is precisely the reason government intervention is required, because the market, left alone, will keep delivering us into dependency. Here is where we end up. Rare earth elements are not rare in any geological sense. They are everywhere. The problem is that for 40 years, the United States allowed an entire industry covering mining, processing, and magnet manufacturing across the whole value chain to consolidate inside one country. China produces about 69% of mined rare earth ore, refines roughly 90% of the global supply, and manufactures 85 to 90% of the world's rare earth magnets. For heavy rare earths like dysprosium and terbium, Chinese separation capacity sits at around 99%. Your smartphone, your electric vehicle, your wind turbine, and the F-35 flying above all of it share the same vulnerability because they all depend on materials processed inside a country that has now demonstrated repeatedly that it will use that dependency as a tool of statecraft. In 2010, against Japan. In 2019, as a threat. In 2024, as a regulatory framework. And in April 2025 and October 2025, as active policy. The American response, covering the Mountain Pass Partnership, the $110 per kilogram price floor, the Apple deal, the Line S grants, the executive orders, and $5 billion in industrial-base funding, amounts to the largest mobilization of industrial policy in this sector since the United States walked away from it in the 1990s. Whether it actually works depends on whether the political will outlasts the next price cycle, which is exactly the test it failed last time. The lesson of Molycorp is the one we keep failing to learn. When prices crashed in 2014 and 2015, the American rare earth industry collapsed within months, and the question for the next decade is whether the United States will pay a strategic premium, a price floor set at double the market for the rest of the century. That is the actual cost of getting out from under this monopoly. Until that happens, the device in your pocket is going to keep telling you something uncomfortable about who actually holds the leverage in this relationship.